Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the show, Rebels with a Purpose. And I'm your host, Terrence Perry. And today on Rebels with a Purpose, we have a exciting and special guest, Geraldine Alshamy, and she's the CEO of Mary Magdalene Ministries. She's also a member of the PAC organization, Police Accountability Community Task Force, and she's also a member of the NAACP. Geraldine, how you doing this afternoon?
I am excellent this afternoon. Thank you so much.
We're glad to have you on the show, and I want to just welcome the viewers to chime in this evening. The listeners, if you want to call in and ask myself or Geraldine any questions concerning the topic of conversation we're going to have today, we're going to be touching bases on unity in the community, policing, and just some of the trending topics that have been going on over the past week and a half. If you want to call into the show, do call in at 919-815-9773. I'm sorry. It's 919-518-9773. Let me say that one more time. 919-518-9773. You can call into the show. But before we jump into a couple of questions, I do want to acknowledge the producer, Amnon. Thanks for having us this
Hello,
evening.
Terrence. How are you?
I'm great. I'm feeling good. I'm glad to have Geradine on with us today.
I'm happy to be with you too.
So, Geradine,
Thank you.
let me just ask you to kind of just share a little bit about who you are, what's Mary Magdalene Ministries about, and how you got involved in that ministry. Also, how you got involved with the PAC organization and NAACP.
All right. Well, as I said, my name is Geraldine Alshamy. I got involved in this work many, many years ago, back in 1982, when I began to recognize a vicious cycle of poor and minority kids, or I like to say poor children and children of color, who were caught up in this whole cycle of children being constantly suspended from school. As I began to see so many children who were suspended from school and didn't exactly know why they were suspended. So that started in like the early 80s. I began to get involved as I went through the community and began to talk to young people and ask, why are you out? And most of the time it was they didn't know the reason. So I then would go to the home and talk to the parents about why these children were suspended, and that's how I became an advocate. And what I found was that many of these kids were suspended for many frivolous, very, very frivolous infractions. And so as I began to advocate for many of the young people around the suspensions, like I said, what I call the arbitrary use of policy was used one way for poor children and children of color, and for white children, we saw there was a definite difference in how the policies were used. And so that's how I became an advocate. And so I worked in Eastern North Carolina for about 20 some years and traveled across to about 31 states looking at how poor and minority children were educated in the public school system and what parent involvement really looked like. And so after working in, I'd say, Eastern North Carolina and across the country, I began to really advocate, and I began to recognize actually the school to prison pipeline. At that point, what I began to see was how children it was not the it was the use of policy, but at that time, folks were using juvenile court counselors to track children into the system. Now we're using the police or the police force itself to track them in. But when it first started, they were using the juvenile court counselors and partnerships with juvenile court counselors. So that's how I got involved in that advocacy. And
let me ask you before you go any further. On that note about the officer. Now I know with the school systems, a lot of times now it's the first involvement is with the resource officer in the school. Once the child have that involvement with the resource officer, it kind of snowballs into the juvenile court system, jail, and so forth and so on. Mm-hmm. So I mean, is is that a trend that that had started with that school to prison pipeline? Once they had that encounter with the resource officer, it kind of just snowballs forward, or I mean, is that design or what?
It is designed. A lot of we have just in the recent past years began to look at the school to prison pipeline. The school to prison pipeline started many years ago, as I said in the early '80s, but we weren't paying attention to it because at first they used the juvenile court counselors to circulate children into detention centers.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, my county became one of the third largest counties was pushing children into detention centers. When I moved here to Raleigh because I did wanted to do more advocacy and to raise the awareness around the school to prison pipeline. It was first coined the homeschool prison cycle, but after then talking and working with many state organizations and getting them involved and looking at the research and whatever, many of the statewide organizations and colleges began to look at it and they called it the school to prison pipeline. But when I first started seeing it, and as I was funded through Babcock and many other foundations, I called it the homeschool prison cycle because I realized that the foundation of this thing was family, whether they knew or whether they didn't know what was going on. I recognized that the only way that we can stop it was to really address the home. So it is a trend. It is a part of a larger process. If we go back and we look at some of the policies, the zero tolerance became very prevalent after Columbine. But when we go back into our history and we look at Abraham Lincoln said, "I see a crisis coming that causes me to tremble for the safety of our country." He said, "Corporations have enthroned themselves and an era of terror will follow." He said, "They have preyed upon the prejudice of the people so as to basically cause them to fight against one another." And he said, "All the wealth will be aggregated into a few hands and the republic will be destroyed." So what is that saying to us today? So when we look back and we look at those things, we see those things begin to manifest. So it's not just something that's coincidental. We also look at our 13th Amendment. You know, when we look at the number of America right now, when you look at the numbers of folks being incarcerated, who is it? Poor folk, people of color, African Americans. You know, so we want to ask ourselves, well, why is that? Why is that? So this has long been planned. The problem is that when we integrated during the civil rights era, we didn't begin to look at some of the stuff that was already laid out for us. Well, we were looking at how to become successful. You know, success was determined by our education or whatever, but we weren't looking at policies that were still in place. One of our Constitution, the 13th Amendment, says that the only place that you can have a slave is where? It's in the prison system. You know, so when we start looking at the prison industrial complex, this is about a business. This is about corporations enthroning themselves, you know, and the era of terror that follows is this massive incarceration of people. The South has never really given up free labor. And that's one of the things that we have to understand. And as I said, we don't pay attention to it because we're so wrapped up into so many other things.
Okay.
Shirley's in the chat, and Shirley's asking, how are you addressing the home to keep these kids from getting into the pipeline?
You know, I say to a community, when they ask me a question, how am I addressing the home? I ask them, how are you addressing the homes? This is not a one-person job. You know what I'm saying? We tend to like to lay the foundation for one person. At this point, I have advocated for more than 5,000 families, helping parents to learn how to navigate the educational process, advocating for children who's been suspended, and actually teaching people how to really what positive and destructive parenting styles are. But this is not a one-man job. This is for the total community because one person can't do it.
Let's take this call real quick.
Miss Geraldine, this is Shirley. Hi, Terrence. How are you?
I'm good, Shirley. How you doing?
Hi, Shirley.
I'm doing great.
All right.
I was the one that asked the question, and I certainly agree with you. It takes a village to raise a child. I happen to be a teacher in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I was teaching some of the more challenged youth. And I saw exactly what you're speaking to. Our kids were outside of the classroom a lot more than they were inside.
Yes.
Which means that they were not getting the instruction that they needed to be successful. And my next question to you is, what can the parents do? A lot of times when our kids were suspended, the parents just came in, they signed the paperwork, it was done. So what more can a parent do when his or her child is put outside of that classroom through a suspension or an expulsion? How can we do it? Because when my son had some problems, I went into the classroom and I demanded that, we look at both sides of the story, and my child was to stay in that classroom. So if you could, address that a little bit for me.
Yes, ma'am. I was a low income parent who knew nothing about the educational system. But the one thing that I learned that I had to do was to really educate myself on policy. One of the things that we can do as parents is to really understand policy. And we have to stand and we really have to advocate for our children. That's one of the major problems that we have, is that we're going to always have these problems because, number one, we have to understand that the educational system was not really meant for black folks. It wasn't meant for poor folks. The education system was intended for rich people in the beginning. That has not much changed. But unless we understand the policy that entraps our children, unless we know how to navigate that process, then our children are going to be are going to continue to be at risk as they have been for the last 30. I've been doing this work almost 40 years, and it has become a vicious cycle. And so my answer to that was to actually teach parents how to navigate that process. Yes. To really stay with parents, not just be with them for a little while, but help them to go through that process. And as a community, we would form what we called volunteers, and so we would have other parents that would go with us to these meetings. And so the most important thing that I think is to start teaching people how to navigate those systematic processes. That's the most important thing that we can do.
Absolutely. I agree with that 100%. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Shirley, we appreciate you calling in, and anybody else that want to call in, feel free to call in at 919-518-9773. We have Geraldine Alshamy with us today. She's the CEO of Mary Magdalene's Ministry, and also she's a advocate member of the PAC organization. Geraldine, let me ask you, I'm going to switch the subject a little bit from the school to prison pipeline to the PAC organization that you're a part of and I'm a part of myself, and that's the Police Accountability Community Task Force. What's that organization doing in Raleigh, and how are you an active member with the PAC organization?
Well, PAC is a coalition of various organizations that have come together around police accountability. As you know, and I hope the nation knows that back February 9th, we had a young man who was shot by the police, shot at 7 times, and actually he was hit 4 times, killed by the police. When we looked at the report that came back to the police, we knew that it was intentional. Anytime you shoot at people 7 times, you intend to kill them anyway. So I mean, it don't take a rocket scientist to understand that if I shoot at you 7 times, I intend to kill you. So what we are doing now is we have began to challenge our city around accountability. One, looking at an oversight committee that has some teeth in it, not just an oversight committee that have folks sitting on it for the sake of sitting on it, but an oversight committee that really has to have some teeth. It has to have some power. It has to have some subpoena power. It has to have the ability for the community to hold folks accountable, and that's one of the biggest problems. House Bill 972 just passed yesterday, as a matter of fact. And it's very challenging for us to fight, because what happens is that when folks are involved in these kind of and I call them attacks on police, and I want to say, first of all, we know that all policemen are not bad. I just want to make that disclaimer right here and right now, that we know that all policemen are not bad, but that sometimes when we have a few bad apples, it destroys the perception and the image of all policemen. And so with this piece of House Bill 972 just passed, and what that basically means, if I'm involved in some wrong in a confrontation or an incident with police, then what it does for me, and when we talk about these body cams, well, it doesn't help me if I can't have access to the body camera. And what that bill has done is it made it impossible for me to get a hold of that video unless the actual police department gives me permission to use it. So they have all this thing about personnel that we can't, if somebody's in a video and then we can't expose that video because this person is in it, and that's a violation of personnel. But I really think that that's just an excuse to make sure that folks don't have access to that camera, because there's so much wrongdoing right now, until it gives the police the ability to deny basic community members to access for that camera. Now you can have access if you hire a lawyer, but how many of us will have the ability to hire a lawyer to do that? So we are also working to decrease use of the marijuana not enforcement of marijuana, but decrease priority of marijuana, because that is the way so many of our people are being stopped illegally and prosecuted. And again, we got to look at how this policy is shaping up, and why it's shaping this way. You just had the U.S. Supreme Court to approve that basically you have no more Fourth Amendment rights. What that means is, used to mean was that if you got searched illegally, then and they found some evidence on you, then they couldn't use that evidence. That's not the case anymore. Beginning last week with the Supreme Court decision, if you are searched illegally by a police officer and they find, let's just say they stopped you for one thing, for your tail light, right? And maybe they found a marijuana joint in your car or whatever. Then if they wanted to charge you with that, it used to be illegal because that's not what they stopped you for. Right. But now that's no longer the case. You can be that evidence can be used against you. So, there's a lot of work that we have to do. Even when we talk about looking at the data, stop and frisk data. You begin to start looking at that data, and how often and tracking. Where is it happening? Is it happening more in communities of color? Yes, it is. So we have to. We're asking our police department to start tracking that data. And the other thing is a written consent to search forms. As I said, that is looking really, really powerless right now, because when you look at the way consent forms are written in Raleigh, North Carolina, even when you start out to read them, it sounds as though you have to allow somebody to allow the search, when you're supposed to be able to say no, to not consent to a search. When with these forms, the way it starts out reading, it really sounds like you have to allow police to search you. So those are some of the things that we're working on right now.
All right, Geradine, I want us to come back to this. I want to talk a little bit more about what PAC is doing in the community, particularly in the Raleigh community with the Raleigh Police Department. But also, I want to talk about the national issue that's going on with the police brutality and the two killings that took place last week. There was two officers that shot a black male, Alton Sterling, and then there was also the killing of 5 police officers in the Dallas shooting. There, I want to touch bases on that a little later. Right now, I want to switch and bring next guest in.
Okay. All right.
And then we'll come back and touch on those subject matters.
All right. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. So what I want to kind of just touch bases on is We are going to be talking about the national outrage that took place over the past week and a half with these killings across the nation, and we're going to have Geraldine to come back and talk with us a little bit more about that. But also, I want to introduce our next guest, also an awesome and dynamic speaker. He's a musician as well as an artist himself. But at this point, he's one of the spokespersons for the organization that's getting ready to have a meeting on July the 24th, and he's Terrence Tap Perry. Terrence, how you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm doing good.
All right. So listen, I want to touch bases with you on the Black Unity Awareness Summit that you all have coming up in about a week and a half or so, and just kind of tell us a little bit about who you are as an artist, and also how you got on the platform of this Unity and Awareness Summit that's getting ready to take place.
Okay. Well, first off, you know what I'm saying, I'm Tap. I'm from Raleigh. You know what I'm saying? That's the city I come from, and I grew up in that area. I went to, Vena Wilburn and East Millbrook Middle and Millbrook High, and, ran around a lot of neighborhoods, and I know a lot of people, and, I've been doing music for a long time. I started off rapping when I was about 15, 16, and that transitioned into me producing, and then I started working under a couple of accomplished producers in the area, and got connected with some really good guys, and it just springboarded from there. Then I started traveling, going to other states, and working with other artists, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Now I'm here, and I'm really trying to establish a front for us to be seen the right way and be represented the right way when we come together and when we unify. I think that a lot of times when we unify, it gets portrayed negatively, and it gets seen as something that has a negative connotation to it. So I want to unify in the name of positivity, and also as a showcase of what positive unification looks like. Okay.
Before we get into the Black Unity Awareness Summit that you're going to be one of the hosts and speakers on, I want to kind of ask you, I know you just did a CD about free lunch, called Free Lunch. Give me a little more insight as to what that music compilation is all about. I've seen one of the videos, but just give us a little insight about what that CD is about, Free Lunch.
Yeah, definitely. I put that project together basically off of hiatus. It had been a couple of years since I really put out an album or any kind of project as an artist. The last time I put out a project, the response came back overwhelming for me to produce, and everybody really wanted a lot of production, and that wound up taking a lot of time from really being an artist. So I just wanted to take a minute and go, you know what, I need to put a CD out. I need to put out some material. And I just pieced together a few good songs, and went on and mixed it myself, recorded it myself, and just threw it out there for the public. It's free lunch because it's a meal that you can just eat. You don't have to pay for it. It's not costing you anything. It's just a good listen that is quality, and that's really missing a lot right now in the areas.
So how can people get access to that CD? How can they get in contact with you? Is that music downloadable right now?
Yeah, definitely. I have it right now exclusively on DatPiff. That's a mixtape website, www.datpiff.com. And you can go up there, just register with the website, and you can download it for free. I also have hard copies. I'm out and about all the time. You can catch me downtown at different stores. You can also catch me. I have a recording studio that I keep open to the public, so it's off Capitol Boulevard. People can come through there and also get copies.
All right. Now, you said also that was a couple of years since you put out a CD or got in the studio. And I remember when you had did a CD, it was a couple of years ago. But the way you did it, I like the way you had set it up was because you took artists and musicians themselves and went in the studio. It won't just sounds that you were mixing. You actually brought live artists in, instrumentalists and others, and you put together a compilation of, I don't know, maybe 15 songs or so.
Yeah.
But the way you did that, can you talk a little bit about how you put that album together?
Yeah.
A little different than the way you've done some of your other stuff.
Yeah. That particular album I put out about about 6 years ago. It was called I'm Different. For the most part, through my years of producing, usually I would sample old records. Sometimes I play different notes and chords and things like that. But I would go and I would talk to people, and there would always be a knock on hip hop. How, you guys aren't original, and your material is borrowed from other music and other genres. So I really wanted to make an effort to make a project where the music is completely original, and I didn't sample anybody's material. And I came up with all of the chord progressions myself, contacted all of the musicians, and really made an organic project as opposed to just making music from an electronic standpoint. I really wanted it to be, instruments and instrument players and things like that. And the response was really good. That album wound up taking me a lot of places. I wound up moving out to the Midwest for a while. I was working with Bone Thugs and Mo Thugs Records, and I went up to New York for a while. I was working with the Skull Gang family, Jewels, and my homeboy De Niro, and I did a little bit of work for Dirty ENT for City Spud. That's Nelly's record label, and did a little bit of work for Universal Records. Did something for Asher Roth. So the response got overwhelming at that time with that album, and it just kind of springboarded into me, producing a lot more. That's where I've been for the last few years, just producing.
Okay, so now I want to kind of switch. I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and get back to the original topic that we were talking about, Black Unity and the Awareness Summit. Now, how did it come about that you became one of the faces of Black Unity and Awareness Summit, and what's that summit really all about? What are you guys trying to achieve with that summit? What's your role for the most part?
All right. Well, the concept for the summit came about really, really, really fast. Me and a buddy of mine, my boy Byron Brown. He also goes by DJ Confidential. He's one of the top DJs in the area. Good friend of mine. Really great guy. We kind of been seeing the current events that were going on, and everybody wants to know, like, well, what can I do? You know what I mean? What can I do? So we just tried to organize a summit so that people can get together to receive information. I think that's the key right now is, everybody's talking, everybody's emotions are high, but people don't really have answers, and they don't really know what they can do on a ground level. So we wanted to put something together that would empower the individual to know what they can do themselves on a small level to affect change on a big level. That's really the ultimate goal of the summit, and we're trying to organize as many people as we can to come and hear that message simultaneously so that we can walk away with a unified front of affecting change, meaning that starting committees, starting councils, starting summit groups and small groups, even with the action groups that we have, really getting that action group level awareness down to the ground level of regular people. That's really the key, and I think this summit can bridge that gap.
Okay, so give me a little more detail as to how you're going to bridge that gap between the lack of a solution to the problem,
Right.
and addressing the problem.
Right.
So how are you guys gonna, give us the steps, the solutions,
Right.
and what problem are you really gonna try to address?
All right. Well, the primary issue that we want to address with this summit is unity and unification and the power of unity. The things that when people hear those kinds of statements, they kind of go up in the air and they don't really come down to a ground level. Oh, we need to unify and we got to come together. And, people say those things, but on what level do we come together? On what level do we unify? So what I'm trying to do is show people that, number one, you have to allocate resources. You have to put money together, and you can't move as fast and as far as your money, your money stifled. You can't get that far. You know what I'm saying? So we have to collectively pool our resources together. We have to collectively lobby for our opinions, and we have to use our money to make politicians listen to us and understand our perspective. It isn't going to be a natural process of just someone caring about you and working on your behalf. You have to really organize and make people listen and make people understand where you're coming from and use your money to push your influence. So I think that the sale of lobbying, the sale of fundraising, the sale of allocating funds and having a committee that is devoted to, getting people to understand what this is worth. I want to have a committee that's just advertising the sale of helping yourself to the public. I think that once people realize, okay, we can save money, then once the money saved, we can buy a neighborhood. We can go buy an apartment complex. We can go buy a gas station. We can slowly start buying things that will empower us to, do a little bit better and be more functional in society.
Let me back you up a little bit on one of the things you spoke about lobbying and the money that. Can you speak a little bit more in detail about what is it that a lobbyist is going to do for us, and how is our money going to impact that? I guess how's the money going to impact the power of lobbying?
Okay. All right. So when the government acts out its ways of promoting laws and passing policy, the politician is the salesman of that policy to society and to his constituency. So what you have to do as the individual person, let's say I'm Tap, I'm an individual guy, and I have a great idea. We need a law that says there should be, bacon on every sandwich, just for example, you know what I'm saying? And if that's how I feel, if I feel strongly about that, then I'm going to use my money to get my friends together and rally support behind bacon on every sandwich. And then once I contact my politician in my area, I go, look, me and my friends have organized about $20,000 towards you speaking on bacon on every sandwich. So now you have what is a group that is pooling together resources to speak one collective voice. Lobbying is the person that you have that is your face that goes to your politician, that represents your super PAC or your group or your fundraising set of people. Whoever goes out on that behalf and campaigns your ideals to your city council or to your mayor or to your congressman, that's your lobbyist. And they use the resources that you have to influence your politician.
So you're saying without the lobbyists, we don't have influence or we don't have power?
Correct. The politician, he can't say, I'm not listening to you, I don't hear what you're saying, or you're going to need a little bit more money for me to understand what you're talking about. He can't come out and say that directly. So as people, you have to understand, especially black people, we don't have an economic base. We don't have a safety net of money that protects us and shields us from injustice or facilitates the programs that we need to survive in society. We don't have a base that's backing us. So what we have to do is pool our resources together collectively. And that's the part for the lobbyists and for the PACs that makes everything important. Your voice goes through the money, and it goes through your group, and it goes through your lobbyists. Your voice goes through those channels. Without those channels, without a lobbyist, without a PAC, without the money, then you're just saying what you need. You're going, hey, help me, somebody help me, somebody help me, somebody listen to me, someone understand. And that people may understand, but it's hard to push your agenda when there's no money behind it, when other groups in society are using their money very strongly to push their agendas. And also, there's a lot of power in using your money. Black people collectively, we have $1 trillion collective spending power in America. So there's a lot of money that is being spent and being made and being used. But in our community, $1 only sits in our community for about 6 hours before it's funneled out into a different community. In the full-on society of America, that's about 36 hours. So that would tell you how fast we're spending our money without a return.
Wow. Now, again, Black Unity and Awareness Summit is going to be July the 24th on a Sunday.
Yeah, from 3 to 7.
Okay. So how do people get in contact with you about that, and how would they know where they need to be, and what would they need to do in order to be at that summit? Mm-hmm. What needs to happen?
All right. Number one, we're keeping it completely free. We're not charging the public anything. We are taking donations. That's just to cover the cost of the expenses of running the event, but we're not seeking any profitability off of the event. What we're trying to do is just establish contact. You can contact me on Facebook. My name is Terrence Tap Perry. You can also contact my buddy Byron DJ Confidential Brown. We're the organizers of the event, and there's also another speaker named Javon Clark. He'll also be speaking, so you can contact him as well. My phone number, I give it out all the time, is 919-822-4700. You can call me directly or send me a text. But everybody's welcome to come. And we would ask that you carpool so that we can cut down on, the limited space we have as far as parking. But yeah, everybody's welcome to come, and the doors are open. any inquiries as far as being a vendor or speaking when we set up the open forum. We also have an open forum for people to talk. You can definitely contact me beforehand and we can set that up.
All right, you all, you've gotten that information about how to get in contact with Terrence Tap Perry about the Black Unity Awareness Summit. But also, if you want to call into the show, if you have any questions or opinions about what's been talked about so far, do call in at 919-518-9773. We would be happy to take your call and just, have that conversation to go back and forth, whether you got an opinion, whether you got a concern, or just whether, you just want to voice your feelings about that. Terrence, also, I want to kind of ask you about what's your take on the national outrage that's been going on, and I'm gonna speak about two subject matters. Initially, the shooting that took place with the 2 to 3 officers that shot Alton Sterling, and the video is out. Everybody most have seen the video. That was outraged about that. What's your thoughts about that? That video and that outcry, and also I want to ask you, in that same vein, there was the shooting of the 5 Dallas, where actually there were 12 police officers that got shot in Dallas, and there was the sniper that killed at least 5 of those officers. What's your take on that outcry and outrage right now in America?
All right. Well, when you're talking about people, being shot or killed by the police, it's going to automatically have, especially the Black community, have sensitivities rise very, very high. And then when you have those situations happen so back to back, it compounds the impact of the situation. So I think the magnitude of it is a lot higher because it's 2 incidents, and you didn't really have time to heal or grieve or understand the first incident before there was another one right behind it. Also, what we have to understand is this isn't a war on police. This isn't Black people versus the police. We're really fighting the law itself, and we're fighting, a systematic version of oppression that we've been conditioned to and we're kind of used to. So what we really have to attack is systematic racism, and a system works as an engine. So we're mechanics technically trying to work on an engine, and it takes a lot of mechanics to work on a systematic engine this big and tackle something of this magnitude. What happens is the fight and the arguments get lost on the smallest areas of what people see. So they see a cop shoot someone, they go, oh man, that's the problem right there. No, there's a system that has these events in place, and these events will keep happening because we're not attacking the system.
Okay. One of the things that we saw, now the video that we saw with the officers that shot Alton Sterling, and you've seen the video.
Yep.
Did it look like those officers' life was at risk, or did it look like Alton Sterling's life was at risk?
Well, at the beginning of the video, you can see that he's not combative. He's being civil. He's being peaceful. So when the situation escalates to someone getting shot and the citizen is being civil, and they're in a place where they have permission to occupy, that's the thing. He wasn't illegally occupying the area. Then you're talking about, okay, who's pushing the issue? Who pushed the situation? Who escalated the issue to the point where someone had to get shot? And if they felt like he was committing a crime or guilty of a crime, then he should be taken to jail and he should have his day in court. So if you're not able to prove your innocence and you're not alive to tell your story, then I think that pretty much tells itself what the details are. I think with the police, if they come into a situation and they have the most authority in that particular situation, then if someone's dead on the ground at the end, they need to also have the responsibility at the end. You can't come to the situation and go, all right, I'm the biggest authority here, everybody listen to me. Next thing you know, someone's dead on the ground and you go, hey, look, I just need a paid leave. I don't know what's going on here. You can't take away your responsibility when you claimed all the authority in the beginning. So that's got to be addressed.
May I say something, please?
Oh, Shirley. Yeah, go right ahead.
I would like to ask Terrence, how much does fear? All I hear is the police were in fear of their lives.
Definitely.
You have men with guns. You have men who are trained. Now, I am not, when someone is wrong, they're wrong. Many years ago, my father, well, he wasn't really my father, but he was killed at the hands of police. The man was schizophrenic. He never had a chance to there was no chance. They beat him to death. And nothing was done. Let me say that first. But I want to know, how much does fear come into play with these police officers? Because even though, for a long time, black men were feared for being black men, for taking white women,
True.
for just outright because of your stature, because of all kinds of things. We were feared, but we were in chains. So how does that fear impact what's going on today, if it is such fear?
Yeah, definitely. That fear is a big factor. There are two primary factors when it comes down to police and indifference with the community. Number one, you're definitely gonna have bad cops. You have people who they coming into the neighborhood with a chip on their shoulder, and then like you said, there's fear. Where that comes from is a lack of familiarity. If you're coming into a neighborhood and you don't know the people, then everybody's fair game. And that's, I think, where these police are coming from. They come from different neighborhoods, different walks of life. They don't understand the perspective of the people in the neighborhoods that they patrol. So there is a fear. There is a kind of, a gang member could come right around the corner and, oh man, it's danger at every turn. But you're in a neighborhood where you don't know the people. So that's why the fear is there. I think that we have to build familiarity with the police. We have to build relationships, and we have to make them know who we are. It's harder to shoot somebody heartlessly when they know your name and they know your family and stuff like that. I think that the disconnect is why the fear is in place, and it's why the treatment is in place. If we bridge that world where Officer Johnson knows Terrence, then he can't treat me like crap walking by me every day or chastise me every day because he have to see me. And then also outside of that, there has to be a rapport. We need to meet up on a regular basis because there's nobody calling out these officers by name in front of their faces. I think that if these police chiefs and sergeants and captains and guys had to meet up with these citizens every month, and you said, officer, this guy, he's a jerk, and every time he comes into the neighborhood, he's giving everybody a hard time, then that person is gonna be called out. And outside of that, if we get that economic base together and save our money, then we can pool our resources behind actually promoting getting the right people fired and getting them off of the force. And that'll also aid getting our black people wanting to be police and wanting to join the force so that we can have that familiarity and see ourselves, with police. So that's the fear, I think.
I have one other thing to say, and then I'm gonna back off. What do you feel about us being seen as humans? Because for the longest time, I've looked at some of my Twitter responses. I've looked at my emails and everything, and I cannot tell you how many times we are called animals. Those
True.
Animals did that, and
True.
those animals did this. As long as they're looking at us as animals and not as human beings, even though we're flawed.
Correct.
The man who shot those police, I don't feel like he was an animal. I feel like he was flawed in many ways. I feel like the police who shot those two men were flawed, but they were still human beings. And until we see one another in that way, we're going to always be destructive. Do you agree?
I definitely agree. I think that when you look at another human being, you're supposed to see yourself. And I think that with the police, I think when they look at, people in our community, they don't see themselves. They see, animals. They see people who don't want to do for themselves, and they see stigmas and stereotypes from their television sets and from mainstream media that tell them that, who I'm seeing is the same guy I saw from TV. And, that disconnect right there is why they can, look at us and go, all right, well, they're not us, and, they need to be treated different. But I think that if you bridge that world of, when people see you, they have to see themselves, you build that familiarity, then it closes the door on, not knowing each other and not feeling like this person is human or not feeling like this person's life is worth it or anything like that. If you notice in the mainstream media, the first thing that happens when, you know, a black person gets killed is they demonize him and his character in the media so that they can justify killing that person. If I can demonize you, then I can take the value of your life away from the public, because the public's perception of your worth is based on your morality and based on your civility as a man. So if I can take that away from you, then who you are is justified in me taking your life. So we got to really eliminate that and build that familiarity up. I think that's really the key.
All right.
Thank you, young man.
All right, Cheryl, I appreciate you asking the question. And again, Terrence, I appreciate you being here and sharing that insight with us. I look forward to the Black Unity Awareness Summit that's coming up. But I also want to bring Geradine back. And again, I want to kind of address some of that same subject matter that we're talking about. And one of the things I wanted to kind of get into, Geraldine, glad having you back again.
Good to be back.
All right. So I want to kind of just jump right into the same subject matter where we're talking about the national outrage. But also I want to ask you about, a lot of times we've talked with a lot of the police officers locally, but even abroad, we have heard the police say, our job is to get home safe. Now, we've heard that, but is that their job to get home safe, or is their job to protect and serve? I think there's some confusion as to they don't know what their job is and what the expectation is. Can you kind of help us out with that a little bit?
Well, I can share my own opinion.
Okay.
One thing is that police take an oath to serve and protect. That does not mean that we don't want policemen to get home safe.
Right.
You know, we don't want a policeman to come into any community and not be able to go home safe. You know, and I just give thanks and praise to the many police officers up in Dallas who did just that. You know, they put themselves in harm's way to protect many of the folks who were being shot. But you know, I'm going to take this a little deeper than what my brother over here says. I guess that's because I'm older. I guess that's because I see things in a different way, and because I look at history. First of all, when we talk about, I want to talk about the economic piece first.
Okay.
And there's no doubt that there has to be a turnaround in the way we deal with economics. But we've been saying that for how many years now? We've been saying that for how many years? So the other thing is that when we talk about economics, we want to talk about folks like Alec. Alec is the national filthy rich corporation who funds much of the policy that we see coming down the pipe. You are so correct when you're talking about federal policy governing police. When we look at the policies that govern police, what do we see? We always see that police are protected. Same thing with education. What has been those systems of oppression? Those systems, from the very beginning, the systems of oppression, one has been about employment, it's been about free labor, it has been about denying people access to an education, and it's always been about incarceration. What would make us think that things were different? What would make us think that things are any different then than it was? Why? Because we now have the opportunity to have a few more things, but what we did is we stopped looking at policy. We stopped looking at how people are implementing. I, on the other hand, think that right now what we're looking at, I know. When we look at, and I'm saying to the television audience today, you need to go and you need to look up what martial law really is and what are some of the stages of martial law. One, it begins with, we're already in that stage. When you start denying access to public education, you are then beginning to look at how martial law starts to take form. When you look at how our food has already been we've been mandated that we can't get seeds and grow seeds on our own. We got to grow what the government tell us we got to grow as farmers. Why do you think that is? That's another form of looking at martial law. When you start looking at limited access, you know, where people can go and where they can't. You know, in some Ferguson, martial law is already taking place because, you know, people are limited to where they can go. in smaller communities right now, let me digress a little bit. I'm gonna go back to my own history, and you call this rebel what? What is it
Rebels
called?
with a purpose.
Rebels with a purpose. Well, let's break it down.
All right.
When I was a young girl and looking at integration, my mom was known as Miss Sophia. You know, she would have been Miss Sophia in The Color Purple because my mom believed in slapping white women. If they called her a lie, if they did whatever, my mom would slap white people. And so my dad used to say, "Well, we can never keep a place to stay because Mary can't keep her hands off folk." But the one thing about my mom was that she always had a good relationship with white men, and they held very honest and open conversations on our front porch. One of the things that I used to always hear, and this was as a child, I always used to hear them talk about integration. As you know, the South is what we call the least of massive resistance. So we have resisted integration. We, wanted to separate from the Union because we didn't want to comply to federal policies. Then, and with devolution, we don't have to do that. But what folks were saying, what white men were saying then, that they didn't want integration was because they didn't want black men having babies and going with their white women. Let's be real about that. Let's be real about that. And that has always been the problem with integration. Now, it wasn't so much that they weren't raping black women and having babies by black women, but they never wanted black men to have babies by white women. So when you look at that and you look at the masses, that was their greatest fear. What is happening in this country right now? What is happening? You see so many black men going to white. Do you not think that is and I know it might seem petty to y'all, but you better believe that's real. Their whole thing has been about the blending of the races. Okay, it's always been about the blending of the races. That economics, when we talk about keeping, because there is an oppressive system that makes sure that you're going to stay oppressed, that there's not a lot of money circulating in your community. All of that is about control. If you look on the internet right now, you will see anything that you want to find about the first stages, and even how our president has already made a comment saying that he felt like that we might need to be under martial law. What does that mean? What does that mean? What that means is that means that our government and our military. Do anybody remember back when people were fighting with President Obama about militarizing the police, and President Obama was talking about militarizing the police? This whole thing with gang involvement has really, it's not so much of, yes, it has put fear in folks. Those gang members are on the terrorist list. They're on a terrorist list. If you have oppressed people for as many years as people of color have been oppressed, it would be in your nature to understand that one day, if I got a dog and I beat my dog long enough, my dog is gonna fight back one day. That is the fear. That's what this is about. This is about that control. So to bring these killings of police officers, I don't think that it's about fear. I think it's about intent. We have got many police officers who have invaded the police department, who are members of Ku Klux Klan. That has already been proven. It has already been proven. And I'm not saying that that's every police officer, but we got to think deeper and higher than what we are thinking. We got to start looking at what these federal policies are set up to do, and how and looking at the history of how it's taking place and how it's shaping up. Over 40 years, I've seen how policy take place. With just when back in the 80s, I talked about the school to prison pipeline. People thought I was crazy. Oh, that's your Miss Geraldine. That's your stuff. That's your. But I could see right then that our children were being trapped, being circulated or cycled into the school to prison pipeline, and understanding that it was for profit. It took us how many years from 1982, and I've just started hearing the public talk about that within the last 10 years. So we are always so far behind. But this is a very, very, I'll say political matter, but it's really about your government. This is really about, when you listen at corporations and the things that they're saying, they say, well, there's too many poor people in the world, and we can't take care of everybody, and all they want to do is suck off the government. So when you start looking at any country, I don't care whether it's what country it is, When people start looking at the fact that there are so many people in a community and they feel like their budget is unbalanced and we can't, and our money is, like you said, it's about that money. When that money, when they feel like their social programs are costing them too much, now it don't matter if it's corporate welfare, but if it's social programs and feeding the poor, there has always been a problem. Every country in the world, when that country becomes overpopulated, it is about genocide. When you look at the intern camps, when I first came to Raleigh, I was sending people as a job to repair intern camps. I knew right then who's gonna go in them. My brother-in-law spent 8 years in an intern camp from Egypt. We have got to be more serious about what is going on in this country. We just deal with stuff on a superficial level because we don't, we're so busy trying to stay focused on survival. We're trying to stay focused on where we're gonna live, our cars, our this and our whatever. It will not do you not one good, not one bit of good to have all of that, because when martial law, and it's coming, it is already taking place, but these folks will take your property, they will take your houses, they will take your businesses, they will take everything from you. You will be limited to the amount of food, the amount of water that you can have. I mean, do your own research. Do your own research. Don't just sit here and think, oh, it's because they scared of us. Yeah, they are scared, but they ain't directly scared of you. They're afraid of the fact that, oh, they're gonna rise up, but we got something for you. One of their first experiments was on this brother back in Baton Rouge when they used that bomb on him. These folks got all kind of militarized equipment that they can use, and they are waiting. Why do you think they've already been prepared with it? Because they already have projected what's going to happen. They already know that if we keep killing so many people, they're going to rise up. You cannot tell me that all over this country, the way you see these folks slamming these folks, and it is not fear. It is not fear. That's intent. A lot of that is intent. And we're the ones that's got to be real about what we're seeing. And so we say, well, how do we stop this? I agree with the young brother. The first thing that we got to do is we got to start educating our communities, not just the black community, but the poor community, because we might see more blacks, but this thing is affecting more people than just black people. We have to begin to understand how we lay the foundation for this stuff. We have to be ones to turn this around. I just said yesterday we had these vigils all over town. All across town we had vigils about this stuff yesterday. Yesterday we even had the gang members who marched to unite, Bloods and the Crips. I mean, they marched together tonight. This is what people are afraid of. In my little community of Wilson, North Carolina, I think there's about 72,000 people for the population. Every day they get 1,000 gun applications for guns. Do you think that don't fear your government? Do you think that don't put fear in them? Do you think that they're not going to get ready for that? So if you can think about a city the size of Raleigh, how many applications for guns do you think that they're seeing? You know what I'm saying? So I say that we really need to look much further. When policemen say, "I'm doing my job," and you see that chief of police are not standing up, it is because every year more than 40 to 50 policies pass that allow folks to police in poor communities, black communities, low-income communities, different than they do in middle-class communities. There's laws that allow it. So when we are fighting, you're right, we do have to fight the policies and whatever, but when we talk about lobbying, yeah, I would love to see black folks put their money together, but let me tell you, ALEC is a little bit further ahead of you. That's why you got House Bill 972 that passed this past week, because ALEC, a corporation that is trillions of dollars, are always present in the legislation, and they're the ones that are helped to developing these laws. They're the ones, and so one of the ways that some communities have done that is they have looked at corporations that support ALEC, like maybe the Coca-Cola company. I think there was the Pepsi-Cola company. So there are certain corporations, businesses that support ALEC. So what we have to do is we really have to address those corporations that are supporting this kind of, because ALEC is not going to change its mind. And I don't care if we offer $2,500 to our black legislative officials, which is what happened with House Bill 972. If we are offering $2,500 and somebody else is offering you $50,000, who you think they're gonna take the money? Whose money are they gonna take?
Geraldine, your point is well taken, and I hope everybody has gotten a kind of just a good idea of what's going on today and some of the changes that we need to make in the community, but also some of the changes that we need to make in ourselves, and just the way we look at things, just the way the perception is out in the media, whether it be on the news or what we see every day. It's perception. But again, we have to unify. We have to get an understanding of how to get in the game, how things really work.
Yes.
Because once you understand how the game is played, then you can play the game. You are in the game, but we're not even in the game because we don't know how the game is played.
We are so far behind in things. I started seeing the school to prison pipeline in 1982. We just started talking about it 10 years ago. Just 10 years ago when it really became public. There are so many things that are part. If we go back into the history, we'll see where these policies have already been laid out for us. So for me, I say, how do we deal with this? Is that we really did. One of the things I said to our church yesterday was when the gang members decided, oh well, we're gonna take this pledge. So what I said to the church, and I think there was like a whole alliance of churches. And so one of the things that I said to them, okay, the gang members have called a truce. But how long do you think that truce is really going to work? You know what I'm saying? Because these guys got to eat. They got to live. They got felonies. They're not going to get jobs. They're not going to get whatever. So just made a suggestion. Why don't we bring manufacturing back to North Carolina? How do we do that? Years ago when I was in Harlem, the vendors have moved from 125th Street to Canal. To Canal. Why don't we start manufacturing, among those young men, taking them to Harlem, letting them get merchandise, sell it the same way they do drugs. We are not going to get economically sound overnight. That is not going to happen. So we got to make small steps, and we got to make even larger steps to educate our community.
Geraldine, again, your point is well taken. But listen, we are out of time. But again, I appreciate you coming this evening. I appreciate Terrence coming this evening. I appreciate the both of you sharing your different viewpoints and also some solutions to how we can remedy the ills that we're suffering from in America, that we're suffering from on a local level, and we just have to keep being persistent and moving forward and having these conversations about the change that's needed
and finding ways to unite. That's most important.
Yes,
just like this young brother sitting here talking about the economics. I know at least 5 groups that's talking about economics. Why those groups can't come together? You know what I'm saying? So
all right, so I want to thank the viewer and our audience for listening in this evening. I appreciate the call-ins that we have, and every Tuesday at 2 o'clock we are here. There's Rebels with a Purpose, and we're on the Nissan Communications channel. We'll be here again next Tuesday, so I appreciate you all. Thanks, and have a great evening.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.